the feeling of being comfortable with failure. And the fear of failure is what really stops people from starting.
Yeah.
It's the concept of like, but what if this happens? And it's this paralysis by analysis, right? I think it's like, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Sometimes you just got to just do it.
Our guest today is Nutrisense's co-founder and chief operating officer, Dan Zavorotny. Nutrisense is a metabolic health company that helps anyone discover and reach their health potential. Under Dan's leadership, Nutrisense has become one of the fastest growing startups in America. Leading the company through rapid growth, he's built a team of 120 employees to serve tens of thousands of members in just over 2 years. Before co-founding Nutrisense, Dan worked as a healthcare management consultant at KPMG, where he advised Fortune 500 clients in 2 of the top 5 hospitals in the US. Passionate about travel, Dan has visited over 100 countries before he was 30. Dan, welcome to the Second Command podcast.
Hey, Cameron, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Really well. I got a whole bunch of stuff I want to even ask you just off that bio, but I'm super intrigued about the travel because my wife and I are living globally and traveling. And I've always had a goal to make sure I've been to more countries than my age. But you're already in the Century Club. So 100 countries. Can you kind of give us your top 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always a big fan of segregating information to different data points. So I always say like best for food, best for entertainment, best for sightseeing. Right?
Okay.
It's hard to encompass all of it. I think for food, my favorite is Peru. So Peru has a lot of like, it's a mix of kind of like Japanese plus Mexican in some way. It's kind of fusion like that. People don't realize, but a lot of time, the former president of Peru actually was Japanese descent.
Oh, well, interesting.
And so there's a lot of immigration from Japan that happened in the early 1900s that brought a lot of that cultural mix in there. So a lot of the food is mixed with that kind of flavor. Right. I mean, I think ironically from landscape, I think Japan is the place I really like.
It's on number 1 on my wife's list to go to is Japan.
It's incredible. Sure. And I think what the Japanese have done that's really well is they've insulated their culture. Meaning, if you go, whether you go to France, London, you see McDonald's everywhere, you see the Burger King, Starbucks. So we Americanize the whole world, which is great for us as an economy. But culturally, sometimes you feel like you're still partially in the US, where you can find a little mini island. In Japan, they were really good at just maintaining their culture and keeping things the way they were. So it feels like a really authentic experience. And I think that part is really fascinating to me. I think more entertainment perspective, I think countries like, this one's a little harder because there's it depends what you're looking for entertainment, but like countries that are usually on the southern hemisphere or somewhere on the warmer weather, like Colombia, Brazil, Spain, they're usually a lot more fun because I think people, love the siestas, have a glass of wine in the middle of the day for 3 hours. So that's the entertainment, depends what you're looking for.
Well, and Colombia is super high on my list. My wife just did over a month down there and she loved it. And now it's really shot up pretty highly on my list after hearing all of her stories.
Yeah, it's always hard because, we always go from, we as Americans love to work really, really hard. But some other cultures, they look at work as a way to pay the bills, to enjoy life.
Right.
And sometimes having that mindset shift is a little bit difficult for us because we want to take a break, but it's hard.
I think it's an important shift. So talk to me a little bit about the business that you're running right now. We'll switch gears and go back into Nutrisense. So tell us a little bit about Nutrisense. What is it you do? I know you said that it's a metabolic health company, but what exactly does that mean? And then, the tens of thousands of members, what exactly are the members doing and how are you?
So when I was working healthcare consultant, I was consulting for some of these big hospitals and I saw over and over 2 facts that stuck out to me. Fact number 1 was that we keep spending more per capita every year in healthcare, while simultaneously people getting sicker and sicker. And so right now in the US, about 89 million Americans are pre-diabetic. That's 1 in 3. And no one is slowing that number down. And we keep constantly trying to when somebody becomes type 2 diabetic after pre-diabetes, we try to help them manage their diabetes through insulin, through dietitian advice, through exercise. But why don't we just stop that ahead of the time, right? And a lot of this is based on bad lifestyle decisions. We as Americans are incredible marketers, and sometimes we're a little too good at marketing poor quality food to people. And so people eat food that's not healthy. They don't exercise. They work too much and they gain unnecessary weight. We cause a dilemma in our country. So we said, why don't we stop you from becoming type 2 diabetic in the first place? We focus on people at the earlier stages. We're like, hey, maybe you have some glucose control and we help you before you even reach that point. Or maybe you're actually healthy, but you want to understand so you don't get unhealthy in the future. So we give you this device called a continuous glucose monitor. It's a device that's been historically used by type 1 diabetics only, and it's become more affordable now, where you take this device, you put on your arm, and it tracks your glucose 24 hours a day, nonstop for 14 days straight. And it
Okay.
sends it to our app. And our app is basically a food tracker that combines that data with the glucose. So now all of a sudden you could see, hey, I ate a banana, how was my response? I ate an orange, what was my response? And you're able to start correlating what foods impact you what ways in real time.
Wow.
You know? And so historically, if you think about it, people, when they want to get in shape, they would use a scale, right? But the
Yeah,
problem with
totally.
scale is like, is it muscle, is it fat? Did I eat early? Did I not? How much water do I have? This is telling you specifically to your body how you're responding. And what makes us unique is that we start realizing that, like, I will eat rice and it has no impact on me. I eat potatoes and it looks like I'm diabetic for 2 hours. And so there's such uniqueness in this information that
Yeah,
we start
interesting.
realizing what is helping us, what is not. Because you don't know what you don't know, right? So you think you might have a healthy diet, but your entire life, but it's actually hurting you.
How unique is diet for the individual? I've heard that it can be.
Extremely. It's
Is it? Yeah.
And it's a thing, like, and a lot of times people will say, oh, we're all unique. But when you see in real time, like literally you eat something and within 5 minutes, you see in your phone and you see how you respond and you all of a sudden are in shock. You're like, wait, I've been eating blueberries for 10 years. People told me blueberries have all these antioxidants, but my body responds negatively to them.
Wow.
There's different reasons for it. Some is genetic, some it's microbiome, some of it actually how you slept last night, right? Or did you exercise earlier? Did you not exercise? And so those factors all play a huge role. I used to eat bananas and blueberries, strawberries every day for breakfast. I thought, hey, getting my
Right.
vitamin C, my potassium, and my glucose kept spiking like crazy and then crashing. And I was just like, wait, but I thought I've been healthy for a decade and I wasn't. I was actually hurting myself and causing fatigue. And
Crazy.
other folks just like have a smoothie for breakfast and they love it. And it gives them actually better energy levels just because we're so unique. People don't realize it. I think coffee is a big one where some people drink coffee and they actually have an increase in energy and it improves them every possible way. Some people just absolutely terrible for them and they don't know. They're just doing it
Wow.
because everyone's doing it. And some
Wow.
people have no impact at all, by the way, which is fascinating too, just zero.
Super intriguing. And is all of this, I mean, I just had to pull this up on your website because my
Yep.
wife is big into nutrition right now. And I
Yep.
think we're going to take a look at even getting both of us hooked up to this. Who are your typical clients?
So it ranges from people who are type 2 diabetics that don't use insulin. We currently don't do people who do insulin because we want to make sure we can help them in a natural way through data and through coaching, all the way to Olympic athletes. We have a lot of Olympic athletes signed up for this as well, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, some actors. So it's really from super ultra healthy to early stage type 2 diabetes, non-insulin.
Very cool. Okay. So how the hell did you get into this? It sounds like you were in the fitness space or you were in the health space before, but you
Yeah.
were doing like Fortune 500s and
Yeah.
hospitals
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's,
yeah. How did you make the transition into becoming a co-founder and an entrepreneur?
so I was working consulting. I saw these trends I mentioned earlier, and then I was in San Francisco for a healthcare conference, and I ran into one of my childhood friends that he was living in Silicon Valley for a couple of years. He just sold a company in the childcare space, and we had lunch, and he was wearing one of these devices, and he said, "Oh, do you know anything about this?" And I just so happened to be an expert in this area, where both from a healthcare perspective, as well as my sister's type 1 diabetic. So she's been wearing these for 10 years. And we saw the progression of these things. They used to last 6 hours, then 12 hours, then 1 day, then 7 days, and 14 days. So I saw technology improve and the price dramatically drop. And so I just happened to know more. He's like, oh, that's great. Nobody else does. Everyone I talk to, they think I'm a cyborg. And he said, I'm thinking about starting this company. Would you be interested in joining with me? And I said, well, there's no person better to start than someone who's been doing companies for 4 years, 4 times, because he's constantly been an entrepreneur, either joining early stage companies or starting companies himself. And so I said, I mean, if I'm going to do a first time company, I might as well do with someone who knows what they're doing. And so I quit my job 3 weeks later and we started a company.
Crazy. It was super interesting. I dated a type 1 diabetic as well. She was child onset, diabetic from the age 2, or an insulin pump, the whole deal. It was strange. I mean, you know what it's like when they have like a tube, you know, you're getting intimate and you got this device hooked up to them across the room or bed. Okay. What's it priced? How does your pricing work? And then I got to be there running a company.
Sure. So the pricing is still relatively higher end. It ranges from $200 to $300 a month.
Right.
The reason is because these devices still require a lot of, so first, the devices are still expensive. They require medical prescriptions. So we write digital prescriptions in all 50 states. There's regulatory laws around this.
Wow.
Then there's software, and we also give people a dietitian as well.
Why is there laws around using a device to monitor your health? Why is there regulation? That doesn't make any sense. Like,
That's a good question. I don't know.
They'd rather us get medicine versus.
I don't have the answer to that. I know in Europe, this does not require a medical prescription. You can walk into any pharmacy in Denmark and just pick it up. And I know that
your device or other companies' devices?
The same device, this device. Yeah. Okay. So we use third-party devices. These are third-party devices.
Okay.
What we built is a software on top to make it more intuitive and help people gather all this data. And you can also do a finger prick. You can just pick it up at a pharmacy in Spain.
Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah. And so I don't have the answer to that. I do know it's regulated. I mean, I think what makes it more complex is every state has different laws for medical prescriptions.
Wow.
You have to be licensed all 50 states compared to their laws. And some of the laws are like, send us a paper document filled out by hand. We have to wait 6 months. So there's complexity and cost there associated. And also we realized like not everyone is going to be an expert in glucose. So we also added a dietitian on the platform. So you get unlimited dietitian support. And what's fascinating is people a lot of times will say, oh, I don't want a dietitian. I know how to eat. I eat all the time. And they forget that there's a lot of bidirectional relationships between food and stress, food and sleep and food. So it's like, and working out.
Sometimes even between food and food. We were on a catamaran trip down in the Grenadines about 6 months ago, and our chef that was on board is a dietitian and health expert, and she was telling us about certain foods that if you eat them against another food, they're bad. If you eat them separately, they're both good. And we're like, wait, what?
I mean, there's a rule that I always say called where timing or sequencing of food. For example, if you have 3 things on a plate, 1 carb, 1 fat, 1 protein, if you eat the protein or the fat before the carb, you actually have a much better response from a health perspective. The exact same meal, just the order of the food.
The order of operation. That's interesting. You said it's monthly. Is this something that people sign up for 6 months and then they know enough and they can get off of it, or is something you want people to be on for life? Our ambition is to help people with this. And so we have a ton of blog articles we read about nutrition and specifically glucose control. And so people can actually just not spend anything with us, just listen to our podcasts like this. We do a lot of health podcasts and just learn as much as they humanly can on their own. And they don't need to spend $1 with us. If they choose to spend some money with us, then it's people who sign up for 3 months and they do it 3 months, let's say once a year. So they learn. Then they leave, they try and change their life, and they come back a year later and try again for 3 more months. Check it again. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought as well. It's almost like I used to coach a lot of CEOs, and I told them that after 12 to 18 months, I wanted them to fire me because I didn't want to become their shrink, right? I wanted to teach them how to scale a company. That whole story of if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I didn't want people depending on me. So I think that's kind of what you're doing, is you're trying to grow them, and then they'll be advocates, and they come back and check in. That's great.
The one thing to remember is this: people don't realize, but their body changes so much. People go through menopause. People have women get pregnant. We all age. Like even when we change where we live, the pollution in the air actually impacts the way you respond to food. People don't realize that. But one of the things we've noticed that when somebody goes to Europe from US, they eat the exact same foods. Their response is actually not as bad for glucose when they eat the same bread in Europe than US. It's the chemicals we have in our food.
I spent 6 weeks in Italy, and I ate pasta 2 meals a day for 6 weeks and meats 2 meals a day for 6 weeks, and I lost weight. Now I was also walking around constantly, but if I ate 2 meals of pasta and meat a day, I would literally have become obese, and didn't happen.
It's fascinating, but like we just don't know what we don't know, and that's the thing. This gives you information about you, because you hear all these diets where someone goes be vegan, someone else says go be keto, someone says be carnivore, but for who? And we're also unique. And this tells you, for you should do this. And this isn't my advice. This is, you literally eat something and you see your body's response in real time. So there's no guessing here. There's no like, what do I believe? Is this an idea, or is this a theory, or is this a fact? And this is factual for you.
I want to find out a little bit about when you were starting out the company, and then this is something we actually talked about at a recent COO Alliance event. We talked to a lot of our members about how did they and the CEO divide and conquer? How did you split up the roles between you and the CEO? So how did you and the CEO decide who was going to do what?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were in a very unique position, those two of us. And my co-founder comes from an engineering background. So he said, and he kind of brought this up to me, and it made a lot of sense. Where he said, in the early stages, only 2 things matter: build product, sell product. He said, I'm going to build, you're going to sell. Right? And I actually said to him, like, I don't know how to sell. I've never done sales. I've worked in finance my entire career. Right? I was a finance strategy, and then before that's corporate finance. And then he asked me a simple question. He said, well, if I'm building, what the hell are you doing if you're not selling? And I said, I'll do finance. He's like, well, finance for what? There's no revenue. There's no, what are you doing? So I think that's how we decided to conquer it. And then so my goal is how to do sales and marketing, and started doing that, and then started ramping up. I think first month we got like 10 customers. Next month we got 25. Next month 35. Next month 50. Next month 100. Every month just kept growing it.
Okay, so have you raised money?
Yeah, we
This is
raise money from venture capital firms.
okay.
So we've had a couple of rounds of funding.
Okay. Can you talk about how much you've raised, or
Uh,
I know that you're going through.
yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
I,
So historically, we've raised 6.4 million,
okay.
and we're planning to raise more.
Okay. So 6.4 million gives you a pretty solid base or a bench to be able to grow this off of. So that allowed you to then go. You didn't necessarily grow organically. You did have the benefit of having some of the VC money, which is smart.
Well, that's what I would say would be the better, but that's not exactly what happened.
Right.
What
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
happened
What's
is
the rest of the story?
what actually happened is we started this company and said, let's go raise venture capital money. I quit my job and I was like, great, we'll raise money. I have my founder who's been a former founder as well. And then we started this about 3 months before COVID. And so we started pitching investors like 2 weeks before COVID started. And then just nothing. It just dried up. And so we had to just say, okay, do I go back to work? Or do you go do something else? Or do we keep going with this? And we just had at this point, we said, let's just use our savings. So we just started just draining our savings, paying our employees, trying to grow the business. So we actually, at that point, didn't raise any money really. We had a couple, I think we had maybe like $150,000 from a thing called Techstars, the incubator that we used.
Yeah, totally.
But again, that doesn't last very long with, employees. And so we just did that and it just kept grinding, paying people from our savings accounts. And finally, when we came out of the early stage of COVID, like maybe 9-10 months later, people were like, wow, you survived that? And you grew every month, 20 to 30% month over month for last 9-10 months. Then they were interested in investing.
Nice.
And so that helped.
And how much had you and your co-founder put into the company at that point when you were draining your savings? How much do you think you guys had invested? This is stuff that nobody ever talks about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really, because we just kept, it's one of the things I just tried not to think about because we just kept seeing the check accounts to go down.
Yeah.
But probably a couple $100,000 each or something.
Okay. So this is, everybody's like, oh, it's so easy to grow a company. Just go and get VC money. Like, really? Like, are you really prepared to drain everything and like not take home a paycheck?
Oh, I think that's what happened. We thought the exact same thing. We'll just raise venture capital money and it'll be great. And then it just didn't happen. We're like, oh, wait, how does this work? And every month you have money coming from a job, your bank account goes up. Here, you're paying for your expenses and then other people's expenses. And you just see like this constant drip and it's pretty fascinating.
Now, neither one of you were marketers. You were
neither one's marketers. Yeah.
Finance. He was more engineering. So how did you approach marketing? Did you use agencies? Did you hire people? Did you just wing it?
The first year I did it all by myself. I had a belief that, hey, how can I hire someone if I don't understand it myself?
Okay.
And so the first year I basically said, I need to learn what marketing is. I actually just Googled marketing strategies and all the marketing opportunities. And there was like hundreds, Facebook ads, Google ads, Twitter ads, Pinterest ads, everything you can imagine. The problem is that my budget was very limited to, I had to pay people salary. I couldn't just go spend thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing as well. So yeah, I basically looked up and said, I was like, what are the cheapest ways to do marketing, right? And that are freer. And so influencer marketing popped up as the number one way. And I basically started talking, just reaching out to people on Instagram, just messaging hundreds and hundreds of people on Instagram who are celebrities in the space, be like, hey, do you want to work with us? And most people said, sure, give me 25,000, give me 100,000. And I said, how about I give you $100 or $50 for every conversion we have? Most people ignored me. Some people said, okay. And then we started doing that way. This person market for us, we generate revenue, and then we pay them out 30 days later. So we didn't have to use any of our own cash flow to actually pay them.
Yeah.
And that started helping us. We started working with influencers as a way to build more relationships with more influencers. So we started networking with them, made more friends, influencers, started working with more marketers and who are helping us. And then we started scaling from there. Once we got to a place where we had a good network of influencers, then we said, okay, now let's start doing things like paid media, Google, Facebook, Instagram ads, things like that. But it took more than a year to even get to that stage.
Has your website always been so clean?
It's been pretty clean, yes, from the beginning. Alex, my co-founder, he's got just a brilliant eye for design. And so he's always been very detail oriented. So I think we started that day one. But I will tell you that when we started, our page was just one page, pay here, for the first like 3 months. That's only the whole website was just pay here. And it had a credit card form, nothing else for a while.
No, it's very, very clean. What percentage of your clients are women? What percentage of your clients are men?
Sure. I would say about 65 to 70% are women. What's fascinating when we started this, and this is where it's important to be flexible. When we first started this, we actually thought it was going to be what we call tech bros, right? 20, 30-year-old men, Silicon Valley, biohackers. And we quickly realized that's not our audience. Our audience are people who care about longevity, about their health, about importance of their health. Or even understand what glucose is. most people, especially men, have no idea what glucose is. They've even heard, and why is it important? Why is glucose control so important? And women understood that. And what's interesting is a lot of times the women brought their husbands, boyfriends, fathers in to educate them.
Yeah, it's interesting because most of the photos on the website are women. When you get down to some of the testimonials, the men start to appear, but it seems that the female focus and yeah, the women talk, women share information. I always think if you've got a product that's tied into both, focus everything on the women because they're the ones that are going to talk about it for real, right? There's actually a book called Trends by Tom Peters, and I can't remember who his co-author was, but she said that women never stop talking. Women take an idea and they share it with everyone. If a guy and a woman both stay in a 5-star hotel and they both have the same mind-blowing experience, the guy tells no one, she tells 74 people. So if you're gonna market to people, market to the people that are going to share your story. And it seems like you guys have done that. Was that a cognizant decision, or is it just?
So I think we're just marketing to market because we need some customers to pay some of our employees because we were like, we're going to run out of money. And then as we saw that the men would come in, they would try it, and they were like, okay, this is cool. Some people would stay forever and like they keep liking it, but other men would try it for a week and they're like, great, and they would stop. Versus women found more value. We saw the results continuously where women would improve their glucose control, some would lose weight, some would improve other things like thyroid issues or Hashimoto's. There's other areas that they were able to find improvements in. And they start telling everyone, referrals started going up. And we started getting this flywheel of just constant feedback of new customer acquisitions organically. We found a lot of value in that.
Interesting. Sorry, and another product question. Are people able to, sign up and use the app if they're buying the devices separately? Like if someone was buying a device where I am in Denmark, can they actually just use the app on top of the device, or do you need to use your devices?
Yeah, no, we let people do that. I think if people really want to do that, we let people try that out because people found value in that as well. I mean, our goal is to help people improve their health.
Right.
And I think we believe that long term, as you help more people, you get this kind of positive karma that we believe in that will drive more value to our customers and us.
Yeah. So you really are building this more as an app and a SaaS company than you are off the product.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, if this tomorrow becomes over the counter and everyone can buy it, we're more happy. Like our customer base will 10x or 100x.
Absolutely. All right. Who are you selling to? Are you selling direct to consumer? Are you selling through businesses?
All direct consumer. All direct consumer. Yeah. We start again. I said influencers. Then we actually started doing podcast marketing, specifically around health and wellness. And then we just exploded, started doing everything you can imagine: Pinterest, Facebook, Google, Instagram, Twitter. TikTok's huge. Probably one of our biggest growing channels around TikTok.
There's a few of my former clients are from the COO Alliance, and also coaching clients are pretty massive influencers in the health space. I'm curious if they're clients of yours yet. If they're not, I'll introduce you. But Dave Asprey from Bulletproof Coffee, has he ever used your product?
He's tried it. But he doesn't currently use it, but he's tried it before.
He's quirky as fuck, so that's okay. Dave and I are good friends, and he'd be totally good with me saying that. Ben Greenfield.
Yeah, I know those guys. I think he has never used our product, but I know he is. Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, we got to get Ben doing it because his COO, Angelo from Keon, Angelo was a COO Alliance member as well for a couple of years.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
And then JJ Virgin would be another one. You know, JJ?
JJ Virgin, she actually has used our product.
Yeah.
I think she's worn our product a couple of times. I'm pretty sure one of our VP of health actually was on our podcast. Yeah, JJ is amazing.
You've never done this before, and you've had to figure out the role of the COO. Where have you? I'm sure it hasn't all been easy. What were your big struggles and pain points, and where have you had to grow the most?
Well, I think one of the things is with starting a company, there's a lot of rejection. And I wish somebody told me that, like, hey, you should have like a ratio of rejection to yeses. And somebody said, like, hey, for every yes, you're going to get 99 no's. It helps you stability. It kind of like, okay, I'm at 45 no's so far, right? Yeah. Versus every time you get a rejection, it hurts. Yeah. No matter how confident you are, it like hurts the ego. And so someone telling you like, hey, you need to get 99 no's to get one yes. Then you kind of have this frame of mind where like, okay, this is normal. Nobody told me that. And every time someone's like, no, I'm just like, it just dagger into your heart. Like, am I failing? You question it. And they call it like imposter syndrome, right? Yeah. Totally. And now looking back, and I talked to more founders, and they're like, yeah, you only got 99 no's for one yes. I got 199 no's for one yes. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, you're killing it. You're doing really well. 1% is incredible conversion rate. And so I think having that like framework of like, what is the ratio of good versus bad, I think would be very helpful. But I think when you're growing fast, it's constantly switching new jobs, because every single time your company grows 2x in value, you yourself have to grow 2x in information and or skill sets.
For sure.
And I mean, I think you mentioned we have 120 employees. This is when I sent you that email. Now we're at 145, right?
Yeah.
So from that email a month ago, we hired 25 more people.
Yeah, every day, this is the biggest thing you've ever done.
Exactly, every
Yeah.
single day. And so like, and I look at my team members where within 2.5 years, people went from individual contributor to manager to director to VP to C-suite within, and then like, and people have to get upskilled constantly.
Yeah, or
Things that take
replaced.
or replaced. And people, in corporate world takes 20, 30 years to do this. And here we're doing it within 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, I was talking to the founder of Infusionsoft, and Clay Mowski and I were talking at an event that we were at together. We were both speaking at, and he said that, and I concurred, that a mid-level manager can only go through 2 doubles in the size of the company before they're unable to stay in their role for the 3rd double. So if you kind of go from 2 million to 4, from 4 to 8, they're probably not going to be able to run the company at 16. Or if you go from 10 to 20, 20 to 40, they probably can't really do the 80. And it's because they can't keep their skill levels up, right? I launched a course called Invest in Your Leaders just to give managers those skills to really excel as leaders. So what are you doing internally to grow the people and to help them, continue to grow so that you don't have to replace them, or so you don't have to have, often we don't have to replace them. We just have to have somebody that they start reporting to. We bring in the external hires. How are you growing people internally?
There's 3 ways we do it. I think the first one is we try to actually coach people consistently. So we consistently have coaching and evaluation of upskills. The second one is we try to find mentors for every individual who is specifically 2 to 3 years ahead of them.
That's huge.
I think the problem we've seen people do is they'll be like, oh, I found this person who's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And that person's like, they have 10,000 people. They can't help you. They're too far ahead. So we always look for 2 to 3 years ahead of someone who's doing something similar. So we specifically say, okay, if we're direct consumer, who else is direct consumer and maybe in the health and wellness space and 2, 3 years ahead? And I think that's been, and specific to that position. That's the second one. The third one is, it's funny you say it, but coursing. We're trying to sign up people for courses or bring in outside folks to teach people. Because again, my belief is that at a certain level, everyone, for example, when you become like a VP or higher, everyone has to be extremely good at finance. Everyone has to be really extremely good at recruiting. Everyone has to be extremely good at self-awareness. And these are skills. Like if you were, let's say, a dietitian, you might be the best dietitian in the world. What the heck do you need no finance for, right? And now all of a sudden you're expected to be an expert in finance. And whether you're engineering, whether you're, dietitian, whether you're operations, you have to have these skills at a certain level because you're no longer writing code. You're no longer answering customer support questions, right? You're now leading organizations. You're not even like people managing as much as you are thinking about the vision and the grand vision of what does this look like now versus the future, and what does the budget need to look like?
Yeah, totally. So how about yourself? What are you focusing on growing yourself now?
Right now, the way we've done this is I will take over a function, I learn it, and then I will basically try to hire someone to take over that function. And my ambition is to always hire someone who's at least 3x or better than me.
Nice.
If someone is not at least 3x better than me, then there's a problem. Because if I've been doing this for 6 months, and this person's been doing it for 10, 15 years, and they're worse than me, or not, or even they're the same level, that's a problem.
That's a problem. Yeah.
And by the way, you'd be amazed how people are worse than me after I've been doing it for 6 months. I'm always amazed by that.
Well, you know what I've also noticed with a lot of seasoned executives is they're not necessarily seasoned. They've just been doing it for a lot of seasons, right? That somebody who's got, 20 years experience might really have 4 years experience 5 times in a row.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So really they're no better off than they were when they were 26. They just happen to be 46. So yeah, you're right. So how do you assess whether their skill level is 3x better than yours?
So a couple of things. One is I try to learn topics. So if I want to do Facebook ads, I'm not just going to go interview people for Facebook ads. I go and I just run some Facebook ads. Number one. Number two, so I actually just execute it. Number two is I try to deep dive on the knowledge of whether it's books, podcasts, interviews, whatever it is I need to do about Facebook ads. The third one is what I did for other people, I do for myself. I go find mentors who are experts on Facebook ads who are 2 to 3 years ahead of me. So I look at the revenue of the company and say, hey, who are people who have 2, 3 times revenue where we are? And then I go get 5, 6, 7 of those mentors and I set up weekly calls with these people. And they, again, teach me everything I can. So I dive into details because you're not going to get those random ad hoc questions or this really in-depth knowledge unless you have that. And I think it's a way to streamline because I think it helps you skip decades of experience sometimes by doing it. Most people just do the surface level knowledge. I try to go deep where I'm like obsessed with a topic and I may spend Like 1 week, I might say, okay, Facebook ads is my week this week. I'll spend 80, 90 hours just obsessing about Facebook ads.
Wow.
Next week, I have like hundreds of questions I have that are very nuanced. People don't even know what they mean half the time. And I get to call these experts and I just ask them questions, all those, and I try to get answers to all of them. And the key there is, remember, you will always have the one person who's contrarian and you want to listen or not. And the nice thing about if you have 5, 6 people, if you have 5 people saying do this and one person saying this, you can kind of ignore that piece and you use the 5 people ratio versus the folks that sometimes you listen to one person and they might have gotten lucky, right? The person might have gotten lucky, but they think that's the way the world works.
Right.
So you have to make sure you now listen to just one person's device for something. And there is this confirmation bias all the time where, someone succeeded and immediately you imagine they're the ones that did it, right? Sometimes they were just there at the right time, the right place, or they joined the right company, right? And sometimes people that failed actually learn more than people that succeeded. And so I think having a couple people to choose from and then looking at like what is the majority are saying is a good way to think about it, especially when you don't know the topic deeply.
Yeah, I love that. I had a guest on the show recently, and he said that get a second opinion on the expert opinion. I thought
Yeah.
that was a great quote.
And when I interview people, I actually pull in these folks during my interview process. And so on the last round, I'll have them jump in and interview that candidate as well to confirm, am I missing anything or not? And the amount of times they caught some like, oh, this is not the right person. I'm like, great, thank you. I missed it.
Did you guys ever have an office, or have you been entirely remote because you started right as COVID was kind of starting? Or you started about 6 months before?
We started, yeah, it's even earlier. Yeah. We not really. We kind of worked at a co-working space for a couple months, but again, fully remote. So we're over 140 people now, or 140. I lose track. I have to ask the HR person, but I think in Chicago, we're based in Chicago. Okay. There's 3 people in Chicago.
Interesting.
Right. We're registered in 42 states.
Wow.
And right now our team is in 36 countries.
What are some of the complexities of managing a team that's that distributed, that remote? And how are you dealing with some of those complexities?
Yeah. The negative about this, there are negatives, right? I can't lie and say everything's a positive. There's the cultural idea of, hey, let's everyone be friends. Let's everyone hang out. It becomes harder to replicate than in the office, right? And also hard to tell when people work too hard. Some people are really type A people and they get burnt out. And it's important to slow them down. There's a lot of times I see where people working too hard and I need to be like, please do less because I want you here for the long term. And there's the other side where some people probably could just do nothing, watch TV and how do you know? Yeah. So it forces you to be very KPI driven, which again, it's a double-edged sword. It attracts certain type of people and repels other people. Yeah. But you have to realize that's something you have to sacrifice in order to get.
Do you think we are going through this stage where many employees are burned out, or do you think we're going through a stage where many employees just don't understand hard work and they grew up on participation ribbons? I came ninth and I got a ribbon.
It's hard. It's hard to say that because there's people I've hired that I'm like, it really depends on the person. I think it's hard to say because I think the bigger piece is it's hard to distract yourself, right? Because I think it's more of you can come work really, really hard, but once 5 p.m. hits, maybe you clock out and you're done and your brain turns off. Yeah. But when you're at work, you never turn off. So even if you're not doing any physical work, it's always in the back of your head, another Slack message, another email, another notification. Yeah. And I think that's number one. And number two is as much as it's great to spend family time, not everyone understands, your kids may not understand that just because you're in a computer, they may think you're having fun. Or your wife might understand that a Zoom call doesn't mean a Zoom call. I went to visit my parents one time and we had a meeting with a very important person. It was probably top 100 richest people in the world. And my dad just came in and asked me to shovel the snow. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm on a phone call. And my dad just didn't understand the concept. He's like, but it's Zoom. It's just tell him to call him later. Right. And the concept doesn't make sense. Versus if you go to a physical location, they can't do that. And so we don't have the same kind of awareness. So it's the ability to constantly manage at home situation plus at work. It's hard. So even when we work remotely, I usually go to a co-working space. And I've heard a lot of people do this, co-working space, coffee shop, because it's the mix, the personal and professional makes it very difficult in my mind.
Yeah, I definitely find that when I'm in a location like that, I definitely am a little bit more heads down and focused, and I don't get as distracted. I've worked from home now for 15 years, so I've been used to it. And I also started my first company from home, when I was 21. So I have been doing it both pre-tech and post-tech. And then I've worked from offices for years as well. But
one thing people sometimes forget is they think, they always say I don't like being micromanaged. And I hear a lot of people say, I hate micromanagement. That's why I want to work remotely. But what they confuse is micromanagement with managing. Yeah. Because a lot of times people will be like, all right, go do stuff. And they're like, what do I do? How do I do it? And you're like, I thought you don't want to be managed. And I think people just take these extreme views on things when there's a lot of gray areas. You want to be in between.
That's actually one of the core 12 modules in my Invest in Your Leaders courses on situational leadership. And it shows the leaders or managers how to actually adapt their leadership style on a situation by situation basis for the same person. Because at some point, they absolutely want to be micromanaged. And they wouldn't call it that, but if they're brand new at something, or if they're overwhelmed, or if they're confused, or if it's a bigger problem they've ever solved, yeah, they want to be totally told exactly how to do it. And then once their competence gets up or confidence goes up, style can adapt. But if managers don't lose that, they're dead.
Yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating the amount of times people tell me, I just want autonomy. I hate that someone's always checking my work. And then you give people full autonomy and they're like, wait, what do I do? How do I do this?
Where is your co-founder and CEO based? Is he Chicago? Is he Bay Area?
He is in Chicago, but he's currently in France. He's been in France for a while.
Okay.
I mean, to give you guys context, like last year I was probably 10 months abroad.
Okay.
And he was probably also 10 months abroad, where like he was all over the he was in France for a while, he was in Ukraine. I was in Austria, then Malta, then Canary Islands in Spain, then Mexico. We met up in Mexico. So like our company's fully remote.
Yeah.
I think as people always talk about like the difficulty hiring talent, which is very true in US right now. One thing we said is like, hey, we can't pay the salaries that Google's and Apple's and Facebook's pay. We just can't. But how do we still attract good people? We realized that we have to give up something else. And we want fully remote, fully like, when we say remote, like you can live anywhere in the world. So we have folks who we hired who are Americans who will be like, they'll live 6 months in South Africa, 6 months in Mexico, 6 months in Australia. And that flexibility lets people feel comfortable maybe taking a pay cut, right?
Yeah.
And you're able to get some really talented people. Like we
or,
have this
or
woman.
They show up with a lot more loyalty because they know that you care about the machines.
Like we recruit this one woman. She's like Olympic athlete, went to Stanford, worked at Facebook, right? And just like top notch. And she just travels the world. Another woman, she's like every month she goes to new states in the US. I think a lot of companies say they work remotely, but what they really mean is as long as you stay within the same state, right? That's not really remotely, or remotely, but work from your house where you live and not moving anywhere else. We truly believe in fully remote work. Even hours, we say like, hey, as long as work gets done, we don't need to have meetings all the time.
Right.
And again, some people want to be in meetings all day. We try to be anti-meetings as much as humanly possible.
I like it. All right, let's go back to the 21, 22-year-old Dan. If Dan had to give Dan Zavorotny a little bit of advice, you're just starting out in your career. What advice would you tell yourself back then that you know to be true today?
I think it's the feeling of being comfortable with failure. I think I had such fear of failure even now. And the fear of failure is what really stops people from starting.
Yeah.
It's the concept of like, but what if this happens? And it's this paralysis by analysis, right? I think it's like, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Sometimes you just got to just do it. And it's okay. And I think this I learned from my co-founder. He just does things and he fails. And I don't know anyone who fails as much as me, my co-founder now, but I got that from him. Because first for a while, I'm like, dude, you're failing all the time. What are you doing? You're just constantly failing. He's like, yeah, but we got it done in a week. It would have taken you 2 months to do it. I failed 17 times, but we got it done way faster. And so this concept of being okay with failure. And I think the reason this is important, it's specifically for early stage startups, mid-stage startups. If you think about a corporate world, the goal for them is different. The goal for them is to grow 5 to 7% year over year. Yeah. And they play the game of risk reduction. How to reduce every possible risk. So they actually quite the opposite. They don't want to fail at all. They want to make sure they eliminate all failures. But if you're starting a company and you're trying to grow the company, the opposite. Speed is what you have. You don't have money. You don't have the brand. So speed's what matters. And failing's okay. And I'll give you an example. Like if you want to bring a new, let's say, shipping software to your company and you're General Electric or Google, it didn't take you a year and a half to 2 years just get approvals to implement that, right? We will go and literally buy 7 pieces of software and just test every one of them. And within a week, we'll have the best one that works for us. Yeah. And it creates a mess for that week. But now we have the best one that works for us, no question about it. Versus
momentum creates momentum.
Momentum, exactly. And the nice thing about it is we know it's the best versus a lot of corporations. It's who the best salespeople are that sold you on that, right? And it's like maybe Google had better salespeople than Facebook, and then before you bought the Google product versus the Facebook product. Here, you get to test it out.
I'll tell you something you're doing well. You said one of your very first things you had to get better at was sales. You are good at selling the business and good at selling the product, and you clearly are passionate about what you built. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Dan Zavorotny, the co-founder and COO from Nutrisense, super appreciative of your time today. Thanks very much for sharing with us on the Second Command podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You have to be very careful about who you hire in terms of culture fit. when you're working remote. One of the definitions of culture is what do employees do when nobody's looking? And that's kind of key here when it comes to like remote hires. You have to really nail who you hire. So you have to be extra careful around the culture component because you have to trust when people are at home what they're doing.